The air was clean, painfully so, burning our lungs accustomed to the polluted miasma of the hive. And dominating it all, a fortress monastery carved into the face of the largest mountain, a monument to humanity's conquest of nature itself. "Welcome to your grave," the Space Marine said, removing his helmet at last. The face beneath was barely recognizable as human. Skin pale as a corpse's, crisscrossed with scars. Eyes that seemed to see through flesh and bone to the soul beneath. A mouth set in a permanent scowl of disapproval. Yet there was something in those inhuman eyes. A flicker of something I could not name. Perhaps it was remembrance. Perhaps he too had once been a frightened boy standing before this fortress, wondering if he would ever see his home again. "I am Brother Sergeant Crastus," he continued. "From this moment forward, your past lives are erased. Your names are forfeit, your families forgotten. You exist only to serve the chapter, and through it, the God Emperor of mankind." Another Space Marine emerged from the fortress, this one in white robes rather than armor. His head was completely hairless, his face a tapestry of surgical scars and augmetic implants. One eye had been replaced with a glowing red lens that whirred softly as it focused on us. "I am Apothecary Vaughn," the robed Space Marine announced. "You will now undergo preliminary examination. Those who pass will begin the process of transformation. Those who fail will serve the Emperor in other ways." The meaning was clear enough. Pass or die, succeed or be discarded. The Imperium wastes nothing, especially not human life. Those deemed unfit for transformation would likely be servitors at best, their minds scraped clean and their bodies augmented with crude machinery to serve as living tools. We were led through massive adamantium doors into the bowels of the fortress monastery. The corridors were wide enough for 3 Space Marines to walk abreast in full tactical dreadnought armor. The ceilings soared overhead, every surface adorned with devotional iconography, skulls, and the symbols of the chapter. Servitors shuffled past, barely glancing at us with their remaining human eyes. Chapter serfs, human servants bound to the Space Marines, hurried about their duties, eyes downcast in deference. The examination chamber was clinical and cold. White tiles covered the floors and walls, stained with old blood that no amount of scrubbing could fully remove. Surgical instruments lined the walls, some recognizable, others alien and terrifying in their implied purpose. Examination tables with restraints stood in neat rows, waiting. "Strip," Apothecary Vaughn commanded. "Completely." There was a moment of hesitation before we complied. In the underhive, nakedness was vulnerability, but none dared disobey. We removed our filthy clothes, the last remnants of our former lives, and stood shivering in the cold air. The examinations were thorough and humiliating. Every orifice probed, every limb measured, every reaction tested. Blood was drawn, skin scraped, reflexes hammered. Throughout it all, Apothecary Vaughn and his assistants spoke about us as if we were livestock, noting imperfections and potential with the same clinical detachment. Subject 17 shows promising bone density. Subject 23 has respiratory scarring consistent with hive pollution. Note for enhanced lung replacement priority. Subject 8 exhibits signs of malnutrition affecting skeletal development. Rejected. And so it went. Numbers, not names. Materials, not men. 3 boys were taken away during the examinations, deemed unsuitable. Their faces showed relief mingled with shame. They had failed, but they would live, or so they thought. I never saw them again. When the examinations were complete, we were given identical grey robes and led to a dormitory of sorts. Rows of narrow cots, each with a thin blanket and nothing else. No decorations on the walls, no personal effects permitted. A servitor stood at the entrance, its human components visible beneath poorly grafted machinery. Sleep. It droned in a mechanical approximation of human speech. Tomorrow, you begin to die. I lay on my assigned cot, the unfamiliar softness of even this sparse mattress disconcerting after a lifetime of sleeping on metal and concrete. Around me, the other boys shifted restlessly, some silently weeping, others staring vacantly at the ceiling. None spoke. What was there to say? We had been chosen, but for what? To become inhuman warriors in service to a god emperor none of us had ever seen, to die in the attempt. I thought of my gang in the Underhive. The Blood Scorpions, we called ourselves, a pathetic attempt at ferocity. We had fought and killed for territory no sane person would want, for resources so meager they barely sustained us. Yet there had been a brotherhood there, forged in shared suffering. Here, we were competitors. Only the strongest would survive to become Space Marines. The rest would be discarded, or worse. As sleep finally began to claim me, a strange peace settled over my mind. I had survived 18 years in the Underhive, where most died before their 10th birthday. I had killed my first man at 12, a rival ganger who had made the mistake of turning his back on me. I had clawed my way to lieutenant in the Blood Scorpions through cunning and controlled violence. If anyone could survive this transformation, it would be me. I was wrong, of course. Tiber Jorol would not survive. He could not. For a Space Marine is not an elevated human. He is something else entirely, something both more and less than the sum of humanity's potential. The next morning came too quickly, announced by a deafening klaxon that jolted us from sleep. We were given 5 minutes to relieve ourselves in communal facilities that offered no privacy, then herded to an enormous dining hall. Space Marines sat at raised tables, consuming vast quantities of food with mechanical efficiency. We aspirants were directed to lower tables, where bowls of nutrient porridge awaited us. Eat quickly, a chapter serf instructed. You have 10 minutes. The porridge was bland but filling, designed for nutritional value rather than taste. As we ate, I observed our surroundings more carefully. The dining hall's walls were adorned with battle trophies, alien body parts preserved in stasis fields, shattered enemy weapons mounted like devotional objects. Above it all hung an enormous aquila, the two-headed eagle symbol of the Imperium, its golden wings spanning the entire ceiling. Before we had finished eating, Brother Sergeant Crastus entered the hall. His presence immediately silenced all conversation among the aspirants. Today, he announced, we begin to remake you. Your bodies are weak, your minds are untested. Some of you will not survive the physical conditioning required before implantation can begin. This is by design. Only the worthy will receive the Emperor's gifts. We were led to a vast training ground, an open courtyard surrounded by the fortress walls. The morning air was frigid, our breath visible in white clouds. Mountains loomed in every direction, their peaks crowned with snow despite the summer season. Run, Crastus commanded simply, indicating a path that wound up the mountainside. Those who fail to complete the circuit by midday will not eat today. Those who fall behind tomorrow will not eat again. Those who fail on the third day will be removed from the program. The path stretched before us, disappearing into the tree line halfway up the nearest mountain. None of us knew the full length of the circuit, but it was clearly many kilometers. Having spent our lives in the confines of a hive, none of us had ever run such distances. Most had never run at all beyond short sprints through underhive corridors. And so we ran. The initial pace was manageable, but the constant incline and thinning air quickly took their toll. By the first kilometer, the group had already spread out. The strongest pushed ahead, while the weakest began to fall behind. I found myself somewhere in the middle, my gang-hardened body serving me well enough, but my lungs burning with each breath of the clean mountain air. The path grew steeper, winding through dense forests where roots threatened to trip us at every step. Then it emerged onto rocky outcroppings where a single misstep meant a fall of hundreds of meters. All the while, servitor skulls hovered around us, monitoring our progress and reporting to unseen masters. I lost track of time as we ran. The sun climbed higher in the sky, beating down upon us without mercy. My grey robe was soaked with sweat, my feet bloodied within poorly fitted boots. Yet I ran on, focusing on each step, each breath. This was not so different from the underhive, I told myself. Life there was a constant test of endurance and will. This was merely another form of the same struggle. When I finally staggered back into the training ground, the sun was directly overhead. I had made it by midday, though barely. Of the 27 aspirants who had begun the run, only 18 had returned in time. The others trickled in over the next few hours, their faces gaunt with exhaustion and the knowledge that they would not eat that day. That night, as we collapsed onto our cots, muscles screaming in protest, one of the boys failed to return at all. No one spoke of him, no one asked questions. He had failed, and that was all that mattered in this new reality. The next day brought the same run, but this time with weighted packs strapped to our backs. The day after, we ran in primitive carapace armor. Each day, the challenge increased. Each day, more boys failed to return. By the end of the first week, our number had dwindled to 15. Those who remained grew stronger, our bodies adapting to the brutal regimen with surprising speed. The nutrient-dense food, the clean air, the constant physical stress, all served to transform us. Muscles developed, lungs expanded, reflexes sharpened. Yet this was merely preparation, we were told. Our bodies were being conditioned to survive the true transformation that awaited us. In the second week, combat training began. Not with the chain words or bolt pistols of the Space Marines, but with wooden staves and our bare hands. Brother Sergeant Crastus and other training officers taught us the basics of Imperial close combat doctrine, a brutal but efficient style that emphasized overwhelming force and decisive strikes. We fought each other in endless drills and sparring matches. Friends were not permitted. Compassion was beaten out of us along with weakness. I took a perverse pride in my performance, my underhive experience giving me an edge in the viciousness required. Yet even I was humbled daily by the training officers, their transhuman bodies moving with impossible speed and precision as they demonstrated techniques or administered corrections. Each night brought new aches, new bruises, new scars. Our bodies were being remade through pain and effort, but it was our minds that concerned the chapter most. Hypno-indoctrination began in the third week. We would be led to a darkened chamber where we were strapped into metal thrones. Neural interfaces were attached to our skulls through painful connectors that pierced the skin. Then the visions would begin, flooding directly into our minds, bypassing our senses entirely. The history of the Imperium, the glory of the God Emperor, the treachery of the alien, the mutant, the heretic, battle doctrines and weapons specifications, litanies of hate and devotion. The information poured into us in a torrent that threatened to drown our very sense of self. Hours would pass like minutes, and we would emerge drained and disoriented, our minds reshaped a little more each time. Knowledge without understanding is useless. Brother Chaplain Mordath told us during one of his sermons. Understanding without faith is dangerous. You will know, you will understand, you will believe, or you will die. The chaplain was a terrifying figure, his armor black as the void, his skull helm a visage of death itself. His Crozius Arcanum, a staff topped with the Imperial Aquila, crackled with energy that could shatter bones and rupture organs with a touch. He spoke not of the Emperor's love, but of his judgment. Not of glory, but of duty. Not of victory, but of sacrifice. You think you suffer, he once said, pacing before us as we knelt in the chapter's chapel. You know nothing of suffering. The Emperor sits upon the golden throne, his body a withered husk, sustained only by the sacrifice of 1,000 souls each day. For 10,000 years, he has endured this torment, never resting, never ceasing his vigil. What are your petty pains compared to his eternal agony? Nothing, less than nothing. By the end of the first month, only 10 aspirants remained. We had been molded into something no longer fully human, yet far from transhuman. Our bodies were hardened, our minds filled with Imperial doctrine, our spirits broken and reforged in the crucible of constant struggle. We were ready for the next phase. The true transformation was about to begin. The surgery took place in the Apothecarion, a vast medical facility deep within the fortress monastery. Apothecary Varn and his assistants worked with precision born of centuries of practice. We were not all operated on at once, but in a carefully planned sequence. I was third. I watched as the first 2 aspirants were taken into the surgical theater. Hours passed before the first was wheeled out, unconscious and already changed. His chest had been cut open and resewn, the skin puckered around fresh scars. Monitoring devices attached to him beeped steadily, tracking the progress of the foreign organ now implanted within him. The second aspirant did not emerge alive. A chapter serf exited the theater, dragging a body bag. The contents clearly no longer of any value to the chapter. No explanation was given. No mourning permitted. He had failed, as many had before him. When my turn came, I was stripped and scrubbed with antiseptic solutions that burned my skin. I was conscious as they strapped me to the operating table, conscious as they inserted needles into my veins, pumping me full of drugs that paralyzed my body while leaving my mind awake and aware. Conscious as Apothecary Varn approached with a scalpel in hand, his augmetic eye whirring as it focused on my chest. "The secondary heart," he stated clinically. "The first of many gifts you will receive if your body accepts it." The pain was beyond description. Despite the drugs, I felt every cut, every manipulation of my internal organs to make room for something that should not be there. The secondary heart, harvested from the chapter's gene seed stocks, was a lump of artificially grown tissue that would eventually become a fully functioning second heart, providing redundancy and increased blood flow to feed my soon-to-be enhanced musculature. Throughout the surgery, Brother Chaplain Mordath stood nearby, reciting litanies of strength and endurance. Whether for my benefit or as ritual obligations, I could not tell through the haze of agony. I wanted to scream, but could not. I wanted to pass out, but was denied even that mercy. When it was done, I was wheeled to a recovery chamber where the other surviving aspirant lay. His eyes met mine, and I saw in them the same trauma, the same fundamental violation. We had been told our bodies would be remade, but understanding came only now, through shared suffering. We were being unmade first, torn apart so that something new could be constructed from the pieces. Recovery took weeks, during which the secondary heart slowly integrated with my circulatory system. The pain never fully subsided, merely changed in quality and location as my body fought against and gradually accepted the foreign organ. Regular blood samples were taken, analyzed, adjustments made to drug regimens. I existed in a twilight state between agony and unconsciousness. Once the secondary heart was deemed successfully implanted, the next phase began. The os modula, a small organ implanted at the base of the skull, began to alter my skeletal structure. Bones thickened and strengthened, reinforced by ceramic-like deposits. The process was excruciating, like growing pains magnified 1,000-fold. I could feel my very skeleton changing within me, stretching my skin, pulling at my muscles and tendons. One by one, the other organs followed. The viscopia, implanted in the chest cavity, drastically accelerated muscle growth. The hemastamen, placed within the main heart, altered my blood chemistry to enhance oxygen carrying capacity and promote rapid healing. The Laramans organ, nestled beside the primary heart, released specialized cells that quickly coagulated blood at wound sites, effectively sealing injuries almost instantly. Each implantation was followed by weeks of adjustment, training modified to test and strengthen the new capabilities. We grew taller, broader, stronger. Our senses sharpened, our reflexes quickened. With each change, we moved further from humanity and closer to the transhuman ideal of the Adeptus Astartes. Not all implants took successfully in every aspirant. 2 more of our dwindling number died when their bodies rejected the catalepsian node, an implant at the back of the brain that allowed a space marine to function without sleep by resting half the brain at a time. Another was crippled when the implantation of the preomna, a pre-stomach that could neutralize toxins, went awry. He was taken away, presumably to serve the chapter in some lesser capacity, perhaps as a chapter serf if he was fortunate, more likely as a servitor if he was not. Throughout this process, our training continued whenever our bodies were capable. Physical conditioning grew ever more demanding as our enhanced physiology developed. Combat drills became more complex, incorporating the use of actual Astartes weapons and equipment scaled for our still-growing frames. Hypno-indoctrination intensified, delving deeper into chapter-specific battle doctrines and the minutiae of equipment maintenance. We were being programmed as much as trained, our minds shaped to think as space marines rather than as men. Individual thought was not eliminated but channeled, directed toward tactical analysis and combat efficiency rather than personal desires or ambitions. By the 6th month, only 5 aspirants remained of the original 30. We had each received most of the basic organ implants, though the most powerful would come later, after we had proven our worth as Scout Marines. We were already transhuman by any reasonable definition, towering over normal men, our bodies, capable of feats that would have seemed miraculous in our previous lives. Yet we were still neophytes, still unproven. The final test awaited us, the trial of fire that would determine if we were worthy to don the scout armor and take our first steps as true battle brothers of the chapter. The trial took place on a death world 50 light years from the chapter homeworld. We were transported there in a small strike cruiser, each of us sealed in individual drop pods. Brother Sergeant Crastus briefed us in the ship's armory as we were fitted with scout armor for the first time, the black carapace implants beneath our skin interfacing with the armor's systems. "You will be deployed separately," he explained, checking the seal on my armor's neck joint with practiced precision. "Each of you has a designated extraction point located 50 kilometers from your drop zone. You have 3 days to reach it. The planet's indigenous life forms are universally hostile. Previous geological surveys indicate valuable mineral deposits that may be of interest to the chapter. You will be equipped with a combat knife, bolt pistol, 3 clips of ammunition, and a data slate containing minimal navigational information." He paused, his transhuman eyes boring into mine. "This is not merely a survival exercise, it is a resource assessment mission. The chapter expects data on the planet's potential usefulness. Failure to provide this information will be considered mission failure regardless of whether you reach the extraction point." Another space marine, bearing the insignia of the Tech Marine Order, approached with our weapons. "The Emperor's eyes are upon you," he intoned as he handed me a bolt pistol, the weight of it substantial even to my enhanced strength. "Remember that a space marine serves even in death." We were each led to our assigned drop pod, a claustrophobic metal egg designed to survive atmospheric entry and deliver its contents, whether space marines or equipment, to a Preventers Unibos C-Teens, planetary surface with brutal efficiency. The interior was Spartan, consisting of little more than a restraint harness and basic life support systems. As the pod's door sealed with a pneumatic hiss, cutting me off from my battle brothers, I felt a moment of pure isolation unlike any I had experienced before. In the Underhive, one was always aware of the teeming masses above and around. In the Fortress Monastery, the presence of the chapter was a constant. Here, sealed in this metal coffin about to be fired at a hostile world, I was truly alone. The drop itself was violence incarnate. Despite the pod's inertial dampeners and my own enhanced physiology, the G-forces of launch and atmospheric entry slammed me against the restraint harness with enough force to bruise even my reinforced skeleton. The pod's interior heated to near intolerable levels as friction with the atmosphere created a superheated plasma sheath around the exterior. Then came the impact, a bone-jarring crash as the pod's retro thrusters failed to fully counteract the terminal velocity. Emergency systems deployed, absorption gels flooding the compartment to prevent fatal injury. For several moments I hung suspended in the viscous fluid, my enhanced lungs able to extract oxygen directly from the oxygenated gel. Then the pod's front section blew outward, explosive bolts detonating in a carefully designed sequence. The gel drained away, and I stepped out onto alien soil for the first time in my life. The world that greeted me was primordial and savage. Massive trees towered overhead, their canopies blocking most of the light from the system's blue-white star. The air was thick with moisture and the scent of decay, rich and organic in a way the processed atmosphere of the hive or even the mountain air of the fortress monastery had never been. Sounds surrounded me, a cacophony of alien life, going about its ancient cycles of consumption and reproduction. I checked my equipment methodically, as I had been trained. Bolt pistol secured in its holster, combat knife sheathed at my thigh, data slate functioning and displaying the coordinates of the extraction point. According to the slate, I had been dropped approximately 48 kilometers from my destination, meaning I would need to maintain a pace of at least 16 kilometers per day to reach it in time. For an unaugmented human, this would have been challenging even on hospitable terrain. For a Space Marine neophyte on a death world, it was a brutal test of every enhancement and skill we had developed. But the chapter demanded nothing less than excellence. Anything short of that was failure, and failure meant death. I began to move, settling into the ground-eating lope that our modified musculature and enhanced cardiovascular systems made possible. Even encumbered by armor and equipment, I could maintain this pace for hours without rest, one of the many gifts of the Astartes transformation. The first attack came 3 hours into my journey. A predator, something like a reptilian wolf with too many limbs and eyes, erupted from the underbrush. It was fast, but my enhanced reflexes were faster. The combat knife found its throat before it could close its multiple jaws on my armored leg. Black ichor sprayed from the wound, sizzling where it touched my armor's ceramic plates. I took samples of its blood and tissue, as required by the mission parameters. The data slate's rudimentary cogitator analyzed the specimens, noting potentially useful biochemical compounds. This information would be relayed to the chapter upon extraction, adding to their knowledge of this world's resources. The day continued in this pattern. Movement, observation, occasional combat with the world's fauna. By nightfall, I had covered nearly 20 kilometers and filled the data slate's memory with biological and geological data. I found a defensible position among the exposed roots of a massive tree and settled in for a brief rest, allowing half my brain to sleep while the other half remained vigilant, courtesy of the catalepsian node. Dawn brought new challenges. The forest gave way to a vast swamp, fetid and bubbling with noxious gases. My armor's auto-sensors detected toxins in the air, but my enhanced physiology and the multi-lung implant filtered them without difficulty. The terrain slowed my progress considerably, the sucking mud threatening to claim my boots with each step. It was in this swamp that I encountered the first true test of my transformation. A creature vast and amorphous rose from the murky waters, a gelatinous mass of tentacles and caustic secretions. My bolt pistol barked, mass-reactive shells detonating within the thing's translucent flesh, but it seemed to absorb the damage, sealing the wounds almost as quickly as they were inflicted. For the first time since my transformation began, I felt fear. Not the constant background anxiety of failure that had accompanied the process, but true, primal fear. This was a foe beyond my capabilities, a threat I was not equipped to overcome. In my previous life, fear would have triggered flight, the instinct for self-preservation overriding all else. But my hypno-indoctrination had reconditioned these responses. Fear was processed differently now, channeled into heightened awareness and tactical calculation rather than panic. I assessed my options with unnatural clarity. Direct confrontation was futile given my limited ammunition and the creature's regenerative capabilities. Retreat would cost precious time and might lead to failure of the mission. Observation suggested the creature was territorial but slow-moving outside its aquatic environment. The solution presented itself with cold logic. I selected a path that skirted the creature's reach, using the bolt pistol not to wound it but to distract it, drawing its attention to one area while I circled to another. The maneuver cost me an hour, but preserved my ammunition and prevented injury that might and have compromised the mission. By the second night, I had covered another 18 kilometers despite the difficult terrain. The swamp had given way to rocky highlands, the air thinner but cleaner. My enhanced night vision allowed me to continue moving even after darkness fell, picking my way through treacherous scree slopes and narrow ravines. I encountered 3 more aspirants during this phase of the journey. Though we exchanged no words, each was focused on his own path, his own mission. We acknowledged each other with nothing more than brief nods before continuing on our separate ways. We were battle brothers now, bound by shared transformation and purpose, but this trial was individual. Each must prove his worth alone. The third day brought me within sight of the extraction point, a plateau cleared of vegetation, marked by a signal beacon visible only to the enhanced visual spectrum of Astartes' autosenses. I had covered the required distance ahead of schedule and compiled an extensive survey of the planet's resources. By any measure, I had succeeded. Yet as I approached the plateau, I realized the final test was yet to come. The area surrounding the extraction point teemed with life signs, predators drawn perhaps by the subtle electromagnetic emissions of the beacon. To reach the extraction point would require fighting through a gauntlet of the planet's most dangerous fauna, a final trial of combat prowess. I checked my remaining ammunition. 2 clips for the bolt pistol, enough for 12 shots. My combat knife was notched from previous encounters but still serviceable. My armor had sustained minor damage but remained functional. I was tired, having allowed myself only the minimum rest required to maintain combat effectiveness. The engagement lasted 27 minutes by my armor's chronometer. I expended all remaining ammunition and was forced to rely on the combat knife for the final 3 kills. My armor's left pauldron was torn away by claws that could shred ceramite, and a caustic spray from one creature had damaged the seal on my right gauntlet, exposing the skin beneath to the toxic atmosphere. When I finally reached the beacon, blood, both human and Xenos, coating my armor, Brother Sergeant Crastus was waiting. He stood impassive, his bolter held casually at his side, giving no indication whether he had observed my approach or the combat that preceded it. "You are late," he stated flatly. I checked my chronometer. I had indeed missed the designated extraction time by 13 minutes, delayed by the unexpected resistance around the plateau. "The mission data," I responded, offering the data slate rather than excuses. Crastus took it, interfacing it with his armor's systems to rapidly assess the information I had gathered. For long moments he stood motionless, only the occasional flicker of his autosenses indicating any activity. "Acceptable," he finally declared, returning the slate. "Though your tactical assessment of the northern mineral deposits lacks depth." He turned and began walking toward the gunship that waited at the center of the plateau, its engines idling. I followed, matching his pace despite my fatigue and injuries. "How many survived?" I asked, the question escaping before I could suppress it. A remnant of human curiosity not yet fully purged by my indoctrination. Crastus did not break stride or turn. 3, including you. The others failed to reach their extraction points within the allotted time or failed to gather adequate mission data. 3 out of 5 who had begun the trial, 3 out of 30 who had been taken from the hive. A 90% attrition rate, and we were not yet full battle brothers. The cost of creating an Astartes was measured not just in resources but in human lives, in potential extinguished so that the few worthy might ascend. The return to the chapter homeworld passed in a blur of medical treatment and debriefing. My injuries were tended to with the same clinical efficiency that had characterized every aspect of the transformation process. The damaged armor was removed, catalogued for repair or recycling of components. The mission data was extracted and analyzed by the chapter's tech marines and apothecaries. Then came the ceremony. The 3 of us who had survived the trial stood before the assembled chapter, or at least those battle brothers not currently deployed on missions across the sector. We knelt on the cold stone floor of the chapter's great hall, heads bowed, still wearing the bodysuits that interfaced with our armor. The chapter master himself addressed us, a figure of such presence that even other space marines seemed diminished in comparison. His armor was a masterwork of artisanry, every plate inscribed with battles and honors accumulated over centuries of service. His face, when he removed his helm, was a testament to warfare, scarred and rebuilt so many times that little original tissue remained, yet bearing an undeniable nobility. "You kneel before us as aspirants," he intoned, his voice filling the vast chamber without apparent effort. "You will rise as scout marines of the chapter. Your transformation is not complete, nor will it be for many years yet. But you have proven worthy of the next stage in your service to the Emperor." He approached each of us in turn, pressing the pommel of a ceremonial power sword to our bowed heads, a gesture reminiscent of ancient knighthood rituals from Old Terra. "No longer are you known by the names of your mortal birth," he continued. "You are reborn in service to the chapter and the Imperium. You will be known henceforth by your designation and the honor you bring to it through dutiful service." When he reached me, the sword's pommel cold against my scalp, he spoke the words that completed my transformation from gang hierarch to transhuman warrior. "Rise, Brother Jorel, not Tiber Jorel of Hive Secundus, lieutenant of the Blood Scorpions gang, just Jorel now, a designation rather than a name. A component in the chapter's war machine, rather than an individual with agency or ambition beyond service. We were assigned to the 10th Company, the scout company that served as the final training ground for neophytes before they would earn their place as full battle brothers. Scout Sergeant Tauron became our new taskmaster, a veteran of 3 centuries who had chosen to forego promotion to train the next generation of Astartes. His face was a roadmap of old scars, his left eye replaced with a simple augmetic that glowed a dull red in darkness. "Forget everything you think you know about combat," he told us on our first day of scout training. "You are no longer gangers or militia or whatever you were before. You are weapons of the Imperium, and you will learn to kill with the precision and certainty that befits your station." Scout training was different from the brutal conditioning that had preceded it. Where before we had been broken down, now we were being rebuilt, forged into something with purpose. We learned the arts of stealth and reconnaissance, how to move unseen even in our enhanced bodies. We mastered the Scout Pattern Bolter, a lighter variant of the holy weapon of the Astartes. We studied the doctrines of warfare that had been developed over 10 millennia of constant combat across the galaxy. Most importantly, we learned to function as a unit rather than as individuals. The 3 of us who had survived the transformation and trials were joined by 4 other scouts from previous recruitment cycles, forming a full squad under Sergeant Tauron's command. We trained together, fought together, studied together. Individualism was not purged entirely, for tactical flexibility required independent thought, but it was subordinated to the needs of the squad and chapter. My first actual combat deployment came 3 months into scout training. A system on the edge of the sector had reported Xenos activity, specifically Orc raiders attacking isolated mining colonies. Our squad was attached to a strike force commanded by Brother Captain Veros, deployed from orbit via drop pod to counterattack an Orc warband that had seized a Prometheum refinery. Nothing in my training, nothing in my former life in the Underhive had prepared me for the reality of warfare against such an enemy. Orcs were monsters from nightmare, green-skinned brutes that stood as tall as a space marine but broader. Their crude weapons powered by some incomprehensible combination of primitive technology and innate psychic ability. They felt no fear, knew no caution, experienced joy only in violence and bloodshed. Our drop pod slammed into the refinery's main courtyard, its doors blasting outward to clear our exit. The full battle brothers were first out, tactical marines in their blue armor advancing with disciplined fire from their bolters, cutting down the first wave of orcs with practiced efficiency. Sergeant Toron led us scouts out behind them, directing us to take up supporting positions on the refinery's storage tanks, where our longer-ranged scout bolters could provide covering fire. The stench was the first thing that struck me, a miasma of crude fungal growth, unwashed bodies, and industrial chemicals that penetrated even my enhanced filtering systems. Then came the noise, the bestial roars of the orcs as they charged toward our position, their crude shooters blazing away with little accuracy but devastating effect when they found a target. I positioned myself as instructed, activating the enhanced visual modes of my scout armor's targeting systems. Through the scope of my bolter, I could see individual orcs in detail, their misshapen faces twisted in expressions of feral delight as they engaged in combat. I selected targets according to the doctrines I had been taught, prioritizing those carrying the heaviest weapons or displaying the crude symbols of orc leadership. My first kill in true combat was an orc knob, a brute nearly twice the size of its fellows, wearing cobbled-together armor plates and wielding a massive cleaver that could shear through ceramite with its powered edge. I tracked it through my scope as it charged toward the tactical squad's flank, marking its path and calculating the lead necessary to compensate for its movement. 3 rounds, fired in rapid succession, caught it in the head and throat. The first 2 penetrated its thick skull, detonating inside the brain case. The third was unnecessary, but Sergeant Tauron had taught us to ensure our kills. Waste in ammunition was preferable to leaving an enemy with any chance of continued resistance. The battle lasted 3 hours and 27 minutes. The orcs fought to the last, never retreating, never surrendering. We purged them from the refinery room by room, corridor by corridor, with bolter, fire, and combat blades. When it was over, 347 orc corpses were counted. 2 full battle brothers had fallen, their gene seed harvested by the accompanying apothecary for return to the chapter. One of my fellow scouts, Brother Crassus, lost an arm to an orc chopper, necessitating a bionic replacement that would be installed upon our return to the fortress monastery. I had performed adequately, according to Sergeant Tauron's assessment, not exceptionally, but without major error. I had expended ammunition at an acceptable rate, maintained discipline under fire, and followed orders without hesitation. In the Underhive, such a battle would have been the stuff of legend, spoken of for generations. Here it was merely another minor engagement, a small victory in an endless war that had raged since before my ancestors were born, and would continue long after my eventual death in service. The next 2 years passed in a cycle of training and deployment. We were sent to combat zones across the sector, always in support roles, learning through observation and controlled participation. With each deployment, we became more proficient, more detached, more Astartes and less human. The final implants were added when our bodies were deemed ready. The progenoid glands that would eventually allow us to pass our genetic legacy to future generations of space marines, and the black carapace that interfaced directly with our power armor. The day I received my power armor was the day Tiber Jorel truly died, if any part of him had survived the preceding transformation. I stood in the chapter's armory as the artificers and tech marines performed the sacred rituals of armoring, anointing each component with blessed oils before attaching it to my body. The process took hours, each piece connected to the black carapace interface with reverent precision, each seal checked and rechecked for integrity. When the final component, the helmet, was handed to me, I experienced a moment of profound disconnection from my former self. I raised the helmet and looked into its empty eye lenses, seeing my reflection distorted on their surface. The face that looked back was not one I recognized. The features were too perfect, too symmetrical, the result of enhanced healing and the osmodulus effect on my bone structure. The eyes were no longer the muddy brown of my birth, but a piercing amber, a side effect of the oculobe implant that enhanced my vision. The skin was pale, where once it had been the olive tone common to hive dwellers, now rarely exposed to natural light. I donned the helmet, hearing the hiss as it sealed to the gorget. The auto-senses came online, flooding my awareness with tactical data, environmental readings, squad status indicators. The world became at once more detailed and more abstract, filtered through layers of augmetic interpretation and combat prioritization. Brother Jorrel, the master of the armory, addressed me, his voice coming through my helmet's vox with perfect clarity. You bear now the full panoply of war granted to the Adeptus Astartes. Treat it as an extension of your body, for that is what it island. Maintain it, as you would maintain your bolter or combat blade, for it is as much a weapon as those. Respect it as you would respect the chapter's banner, for it represents 10,000 years of warfare in the Emperor's name. I flexed my gauntleted hands, feeling the power armor's systems respond to the neural impulses transmitted through the black carapace. The suit multiplied my already enhanced strength many times over, yet moved with a fluidity that belied its massive weight. I took a step, then another, adjusting to the sensation of walking in what was essentially a small tank shaped like a man. Your final trial awaits, the armory master continued. May the Emperor guide your bolter. The final trial was both simpler and more profound than any that had come before. We were taken deep into the fortress monastery, to a chamber known as the Hall of Truth. There, attended only by the chapter's senior officers and chaplains, we would face the ultimate test of our transformation and indoctrination. The Hall of Truth was circular, its walls lined with statues of chapter heroes dating back to the founding. The floor was inscribed with text in an ancient script, passages from the Codex Astartes and the chapter's own battle liturgies. In the center stood a simple pedestal bearing a single item, a bolt pistol of ancient design, its metal worn smooth by thousands of hands that had held it before mine. Chapter Master Varnax himself presided over the ceremony, accompanied by Brother Chaplain Mordath and Brother Apothecary Varn, the trinity that had overseen our transformation from the beginning. Gathered around them were the company captains and other senior officers, their armor adorned with honors from countless campaigns. Step forward, Brother Jorrel, Varnax commanded. I advanced to the center of the chamber, my armor's auto-senses picking up subtle energy readings from the floor and walls that suggested technologies far more advanced than the chamber's ancient appearance implied. Remove your helm, Mordath instructed. I complied, disengaging the seals and lifting the helmet from my head. The air in the chamber was cold and still, heavy with the scent of incense and the subtle ozone tang of active technology. You stand before your chapter as one transformed, Varnax continued. Body remade, mind indoctrinated.